Okay, I think we can start. Are you able to get me? You can't get me. Oh, are you able to get me?
Can you get me now, sir?
Good afternoon. I can get you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Are you able to get me?
Yes, I'm getting you loud and clear.
Okay. I think we'll just have to start. We can't wait any longer.
All right, sir.
Yesterday we did look at how to create tables. We started by looking at how to create databases. Then we started looking at how to create tables. Today, I want us to look at how to create tables, modify them, then look at constraints. Yeah. I want us to create a new database. And in there, we are going to create a few tables, which we are going to use for demonstration purposes. So I've switched to my server management studio, and I'll start a new query. Okay. Okay, so I will start by creating a new database, which I'll call my test. DB. Okay, then I'll switch to this database. Now, in this database, I'm going to create a new database for employees or members of staff. So I'll start, create table. The name of the table is going to be employees, open bracket. Each member of staff is going to have a man number. Okay, so this new database, we have this new database called my test database. And the first table that we are creating is going to be for employees. And it's going to have 4 columns, okay? So I can check in the object explorer for the new table and database. Okay. So that's our new table. Now, if you want to get more information about the table, the description of the table, there is a script which is applied with the SQL Server, which is sp_l. And here you put the name of the table which you want to describe. So this script is going to give you a detailed description of the table that you have indicated to show you the column names, the data types, and some additional information. If you have set a primary key, that will be indicated there, okay? As it is, we have no primary key. We have not set any column to be an identity column. But that's a summary of the information about the new table that we have created. Now, When you create a table, you can make some changes to it. Okay. For example, I may realize that I need to add a new column to this new database. So I can say author table. Then the name of the table. Then I say add, and then the name that I want to assign to the new table. So I'm going to use email underscore address, followed by the data type. So now if we refresh the tables, we should have a fifth column for email addresses. Okay. In SQL Server, if you want to add multiple columns at once, for example, I want to add 2 columns for the address. I can say add address 1 voucher. So I've indicated 2 columns which I want to add to the new table. So for the new tables, if you are adding multiple tables, you use the keyword add once, then you list the column names and corresponding data types separated by commas. Okay. So now we can refresh and check on the new changes to the database. Okay. So I've added all these columns to the new database. I may want to delete a column. Again, for deleting columns, you use alter table command. Employees, then drop column. Address 2. Okay. So I want to delete this column I've added. Okay, so that's how you can add columns to an existing table and delete them. There are times when you may want to change the data type. You have created a column assigned it a given data type, then for some reason, you need to change that. Again, what you do is you use the same statement, alter table, then alter, then the table that you want to change. So for example, if the address one, I want to change that to, I want to change the data type. I can say address one. Sorry. For altering, I need to indicate that this is a column. Okay. I want to alter the column, and I'll say char. So I want to change the data type from varchar to char, and the size is going to be increased to 100 from 50. So again, I can refresh. Okay, so please take note. This is sometimes confusing. When you are adding the column, you do not include the keyword column. Okay. So if I was to add the keyword column there, I would get an error message when trying to add. So for adding columns, you do not specify the keyword column. But when you want to delete a column or change the column, you have to include the keyword column. Okay, that's about creating and modifying tables. Now, one key aspect of managing tables is the use of constraints. And I want to spend a few moments looking at constraints. Okay. When you create a database, one of the key concerns is to maintain the data integrity. In data integrity, we are trying to ensure that the data which is in the table is complete. Want to ensure that the data in the table is complete, is reasonable, and is accurate. Okay. And to do that, there are a number of things that we can do. For example, you can set a primary key. A primary key is going to ensure that it's able to uniquely identify each row in the table. In other words, it will not allow duplication of values. It will not accept null values. Okay. Now, data integrity can be divided into different types. There is entity integrity, domain integrity, referential integrity, and user-defined integrity. Entity integrity is concerned with ensuring that the data in a given table, member when we introduced entities, we said that in the implementation of entities, entities are going to be equivalent to tables. Okay, so in a given table, for it to have integrity, there should be only one field which will uniquely identify each row in that table. Okay. So if entity integrity refers to ensuring that each row in a given table is identified by means of one value. Okay. Domain integrity is slightly different. For domain integrity, you want to ensure that only a range of values are accepted into the column. So domain integrity ensures that only a specified range of values are stored in a given column. This can be enforced by means of restricting the type of data that you are entering in the column. If a column is meant to be used for integers, it should not be used for characters such as text. Okay.
Yeah.
If a column is meant for dates, it should not accept decimal numbers and so on. But it goes beyond that. It also looks at the format. The format could be that you have a column for maybe a catalog reference number for a library system, where maybe the first two characters are supposed to be letters, followed by maybe 4 digits. Again, you can perform such a check to make sure that any value entered in that column should start with 2 letters followed by 4 digits. Another example is think of a company which has maybe branches in Lusaka, Kitwe, Kasama, and Livingstone. And in the table for employees, you want to indicate the town where they are located. Although entering dollar would make sense, but the company doesn't have a branch in Ndola. So would want to restrict towns entered to just these 4, Lusaka, Kitwe, Kasama, and Livingstone. So we can use domain integrity to make sure that on these 4 towns are entered in a column. Any other town that is entered is going to be rejected. That's domain integrity. The third one is referential integrity. Referential integrity ensures that the values of a foreign key has a corresponding matching value in the primary table. What I mean is this. If you have a table for videos and a table for rentals, in the table for rentals, video ID is going to appear as a foreign key, meaning that there's a video which is in the videos table, which you are entering in the rentals table. So referential integrity will ensure that when a video ID is entered in rentals table, it should have a matching value in the videos table. So if the videos are from 1 to 10, and someone tries to enter video ID in rentals table 11, the system should reject that because there will be no matching value in the corresponding row in the primary table. Otherwise, when you allow such, it's going to make the data to lack integrity. It's not going to make sense to have a video ID for which you have no information about. Okay, so referential integrity is there to ensure that the values entered in the foreign key should have a matching value in the primary table. Okay. And the fourth type of integrity is the user-defined integrity. This one is a more general term for any rules about the data that you may define for the table. For example, it could be that you are designing a table for a university, and one of the tables is going to contain the number of courses a student is taking per semester. Now, some universities have rules whereby they will say for a student who is full-time, they must take a minimum of 3 courses and a maximum of maybe 6 courses. So if you enter a value, say 8, the system should be able to pick that as an error. So for such kind of rules, these are business rules which will be dependent on the individual organization. The database should be able to catch such type of mistakes and ensure that this data is not saved in the database. So that's what I mean by user-defined integrity. Are we together?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The next component is the constraints. Constraints are a means by which you implement some of the data integrity types that we have mentioned before. Okay? And our constraints define rules that must be followed to maintain the consistency and correctness of data that is entered in a database. So for each column where you need to apply some checks, you can use constraints to define some rules about what kind of information should be entered in that given column. Constraints can be created at the time you're creating the table, or they can be added later by modifying the table. When you add a constraint to an existing table, the database engine is going to check the existing data to see if it meets the conditions that you have set. For example, if you have a table for maybe members or employees, and you don't want, you create a table, at first you don't mind if there's no first name, the data should be entered. But then you add a constraint which will require that a name should be entered in the column for first name. Once you do that, once you make that change to the table, the database engine is going to check on the existing rows to see if there are any that do not have first names entered. And if there are any, then that constraint will not be affected. You will need to update the data or delete the data before that constraint can be applied. Constraints can be created when you are creating the table. So you use the create table statement, or if you are going to add a constraint to an existing table, you use the alter table statement. We'll look at 5 types of constraints. The first one is the primary key constraint. Then there's unique constraint, foreign key constraint, check constraint, and default constraint. The primary key constraint, this is set on a column or a number of columns to uniquely identify each row in a table. A primary key can be applied to a single column, or sometimes you can apply it to multiple columns. What I mean is this. For example, if you remember the structure of the renters table, it had video ID, member ID, date rented, days hired, and I think the cost. Now,
Yes.
It's possible to use a number of these columns to make a composite primary key. For example, you can make an assumption that a member of the video library would not borrow the same video more than once in a day. So if that is the case, then you can use the video ID, member ID, and date rented. The 3 of them, they will constitute a primary key, meaning that the set of values for each row in these columns should not be repeated for any row, because the primary key requires that the value in a given column, in a given row, should not be repeated, should not be duplicated. Secondly, the primary key requires that null values should not be accepted. And for a primary key, only one primary key can be defined for per table. You cannot define 2 primary keys for the same table. Only one primary key can be defined for a given table. Okay, let's look at how we can work with primary keys. I'm going to create a new table. Are you able to see my server management studio?
Oh, it does not come yet.
Oh. Are you able to see it now?
Yeah, it has come.
Okay. So I'm going to create a new table for renters, and I'm going to, let me start with the videos. So we said you can create a table, videos, video ID. This will be int, and I'll use identity to start from 1 up to 1. Not now. Incidentally, that is also a constraint. When you say not now, you are specifying that the data will not be accepted unless something has been entered in this column. Okay. Then primary key. Video title. Again, it would not make much sense to have a video ID without the title. So I'll put a note now.
Yes.
Can have a supplier. Suppose the supplier ID consists of 4 letters. Rental price. More money. Okay. So that's our table. Okay. So we have set the primary key for this one. Now, if you want to create a table and use maybe 2 columns for the primary key, then we can do it as follows. Create table. Let's say I'm creating a table for training members of staff. Then I'll have course code. Any column that is going to be part of a composite primary key should not allow null values. Okay. Okay, so let's suppose this is going to be our table. It's going to consist of 3 columns, but we want to set the course code and the man number as a composite primary key. So what I'll do is below I'll say constraint primary, sorry, constraint. First, I need to give a name that will be used to identify this primary key. So I'll say PK underscore man number underscore course code. Then primary key, open bracket. And then I need to list the columns which are going to form part of the composite primary key. So there will be course code, comma, and man number. So for composite primary key, I have to define it after I've stated the columns that are going to make up the table. And like if you are using a primary, setting a primary key on a single column, you can indicate it right there. But if you are going to use multiple columns, then you have to add it after you have stated all the columns. So if we go back to refresh the table, so primary key there, and because primary keys are unique constants, they are not going to be listed there. But let me open that. So I'm going to see the icons for the key on each of those columns which are part of the composite primary key. Are we together?
Yes, sir.
Let me go back to the database for videos. So we're going to make a table for rentals. So we say create table. Rentals. There'll be video ID. Set it to int. Not now. Okay, for this one, let me leave out not now, so that you see what happens, then we'll make some modifications. Then member ID, int, and then get rented, that now. Then days hired, int. Yeah. Okay. So that's the table. Now, if we try I'll make it properly, then I'll just come and delete it and try it again. Not now. So when I get there, I need to indicate that I'm adding a constraint, which is a primary key, and I'll say this will be for a table called rentals. You can give it any name as long as it makes sense.
Okay.
Rentals connecting to members and to videos. It's a primary key. So we're going to have video ID. Member ID. Then date rented. So we have indicated the 3 columns which we want to be part of the composite primary key. So when we open it, we see that all these columns are part of the composite primary key. Are we together?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Any questions?
Yes, I have a question, sir.
Yes, yes.
The previous table that you created, the training table, I've
Okay.
seen that it has 2 primary keys on the table that is showing.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to be clear. Does it mean it has 1 row for a primary key and the other row for a composite key, or they are all primary keys? Because when I tried to do that, it
Okay. Yes, yes, can go ahead.
yes, the time I tried to put 2 primary keys on the same table, it refused that. I cannot put 2 primary keys on the same table. So, but there I saw 2 primary keys. Does it mean one is a composite key, the other one is a primary key, or they are all primary keys?
Okay, this is the table you're referring to.
Yes, this one.
Okay. What I explained is, if you remember, I've explained that for primary keys, you can only have 1 primary key per table. You cannot have more than 1 primary key.
Yes.
But in creating that table, I'm looking for the corner. Did I move the?
I think it's done.
Okay, it's here.
Yeah, it's there. Yes.
If you look at that, I haven't set individual columns to be primary keys. I've specified that the primary key consists of 2 columns, course code and man number.
Okay.
So those keys together, they form a primary key.
Oh.
Now let me show you this. If we are to enter data into this one, suppose we have 2 members of staff and maybe Okay, 5 members of staff with the man numbers are 101, 102, 103, and we have 2 courses. Courses could be could be 1. What did we? Was it this? Is it data? What type of data type are we giving it? Course code. Okay. So we can have a course and the man number 101, and that could be maybe 20, 20, 01, 01. What have I put in here? Date. Okay. I may need to put this. No search data type. Okay. Now, the same course could be another member of staff whose number is 103 who is taking that course. Now, we said that this is a primary key and no repetition are allowed.
Yes.
But it's looking at this as a set. So that one and that one. So as long as this set is unique, then that's fine.
Oh, okay.
So even for example, there's another course, and 101 has also enrolled for this course, which started in December 20th. And so it will accept like that. But if I try to repeat any pair, for example, this one, if I try to repeat this one and that one, then it's going to reject it. So I'll get an error message that the data could not be committed or saved because this pair is identical to that pair. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very clear. I'm very clear now.
Okay.
I'm very clear.
Okay. So that's how you set primary keys when you are creating tables. But you can also set primary keys after you have created a table. Okay. So let me create a new table and say members. Okay, I'll make a new table called sales personnel and staff ID, which will be int, and we can use identity 1,1. First name, Okay, suppose we make this table.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's our table. Okay. Now, if I want to set this as a primary key,
Primary key.
sorry. Okay, I think it's still work. So I'll say author table,
Table.
cells,
So
let's go,
personnel.
and then I'll say author.
Well,
I want to alter the column for staff ID. Sorry, I'm adding a constraint, add constraint. And this will be a primary key for sales, personnel, and linking to staff ID. For the name of the constraint, the only requirement is the requirements should be there should be no spaces, and
okay.
it should be unique from other names that you have assigned.
Okay.
So that's why I'm putting something like that. Okay. Then I say primary key, open bracket, and I put the field that I want to use to set as a primary key. Now, this is not going to work for one reason. I shouldn't have used identity, but I've set it to int and I'm using identity, but I have not ruled out the possibility of having null values. Oh, okay, it has been accepted because I had used the, let me just delete this table. So, table. So, let me just delete it. Okay, so I will move this. So I'm just going to use int and create this new table. To make it different, I'll put a 2 there. Okay. So now, can check in here. So let's say our table. Okay. So now I want to use this as my primary key. So I highlight and execute. And they say it gives me this error message saying that cannot define primary key constraint on a nullable column in table. So first I need to go back and say author, column. I want to change this column, staff. int. Oh, okay. Something strange is happening. Int and not now.
Oh.
So I want to make it
At the end there.
come again.
At the end of not now, at now there are those two dots, yes.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was a semicolon. Okay.
Yes.
So I changed that. Then now I can change this one. So a primary key would not work on a column which is set to accept null values. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So that's the first constraint, the primary key. The second constraint is called unique. And let me just make it capital. Okay. Unique constraint is similar to primary key in the sense that it ensures that all the values entered in the given column are different, except for one small difference. The unique constraint will accept at least one row to be set to null, to have a null value. Okay? It will accept at least one row to have a null value, which this is the major difference between a unique constraint and primary key constraint. Primary key constraint does not accept duplication. It does not accept null values. Unique constraint will accept a single column to be set to null value. The second difference between unique constraint and primary key constraint is that unique constraint can be set on more than one column in a single table.
Okay.
Now, you normally want to use it where on a field which is not a primary key, but where you can easily use it to identify a single row in a table, or where it's not just acceptable to have the same value more than once. For example, if you're creating a website with login, with the provision for user to create their user accounts, you do not want two users to have the same username. So although you're not going to use username as a primary key, you might use user ID as a primary key, but on the user name, you can put a unique constraint so that no two users should have the same username. Syntax is, that's the syntax. When you are creating a table, it's just the normal way, except after the data type, you can put the constraint.
Okay.
So let me go to Server Studio and So suppose I want to create a table for user accounts for an online authentication system. So I'll say create table, and I'll just call it users. Then I'll say user ID. You can say int identity. Not now. And primary key. Then I'll say username, Bancha. Then I'll say oh, this is not unique. Then first name, Bancha. And last name, okay. So it's going to have 4 columns: user ID, username, first name, last name. For this one, I've said that they should not have the same. Let me also add email address. Okay, so now let me try to enter data into this table. So I set insert. The name is users. And table columns. Why have I removed user ID?
You removed the user ID because it already has it has an identity key.
I've removed it, yes, because the system automatically generates values for that column.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to enter this 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, again, I can enter another row, or maybe, yeah, just one more. Suppose There's a user called Mary Musonda. Okay. So I'll get an error message about the violation because this username would have been repeated. If I change this one and try the email address, again, I'll still get the error message. Okay. So that's the purpose of the unique constraint. You use it where you want values to be different for each row. It differs from the primary key in two ways. One, unique constraint will accept one null value. You can apply it to multiple columns in the same table. Any questions?
Okay. Yes, sir. I have a question.
Yes.
On the insert command, yes, there you did not include insert into.
Yes.
Sorry, come again?
On the insert
command,
users,
yes.
then the there on insert, the one that we normally use is insert into the table name and the columns. But the word into was not there and it has worked. Does it mean
Okay, I see.
Yes.
The word into is optional.
Okay.
Can be left out and it should be able to work. It's optional.
Okay. All right, I understand.
Okay. Let's go back to that's a unique constraint. What am I doing? Okay, so that's a unique constraint. The third constraint is the check constraint. The check constraint enforces domain integrity by restricting the values to be inserted in a column. Multiple check constraints can be defined on a single column. I hope you noticed the difference. So let me just, some people are trying to call me. Okay, so I'll say, I hope you noticed the difference. For a check constraint, you can define more than one check on the same column. If you do that, the checks are going to be evaluated in the order in which you have indicated them. So for example, you can have a column for where to enter sales amount for maybe sales agents. So you can put a constraint to check that the sales amount should be greater than 0, greater than or equal to 0. But then you might also put a limit to say the sales amount should not be more than 1 million kwacha on the same column. If you do that, the database engine is going to start by executing the first column, the first constraint, which is to check that the value entered is less than, is greater than or equal to 0. Then it will go to, if that condition is satisfied, then it will go to the second condition, which is less than 1 million kwacha. Okay, are we together?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe a few examples. Let's create a new table. Okay, for this one, we'll say create table, and this will be for products, a product ID, int, that's a primary, okay. Product, description, voucher, and it makes sense not to allow now values there. Then selling price. So for selling price, can say small money, and then we put the constraint. We say check, open bracket, then we say selling price should be greater than 0. Otherwise, it will be a loss. Okay. If we had okay. Now, notice this that here I've omitted the name of the constraint. What I'm doing is I'm leaving it up to the database engine to create, to give it its own constraint name. Okay. Okay. So now let's try to enter data into this table. So insert, this is products. Product description, then selling price. Um, okay, so we set. Oh, what is it? Oh, the product ID we didn't use identity, so we have to enter that comma and put one there. Okay, so we still get an error message. What are we missing? One columns and so we have this one.
Yes, you have only entered 2 columns there. Then the values are for 3 columns.
Where is the product ID?
What's missing is product description.
Description. So 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Now, if I try to say, enter another one, say this is 2 terabyte, and I said the price is 0, and that will be number 2. Okay. Then it will reject that because the price must be greater than 0, but in this case it's equal to 0.
Okay.
If I want to add it to an existing table, I'll use the alter table statement, and the only thing is I'll need to include the name for the let's delete this table. Okay, so now if I leave out this part, I create it. Now, if I want to add that constraint, I would use alter table, and the table is products. Then I'm adding a constraint. I need to give it a name now. So I would say selling. So check underscore selling put the name of the product, then selling price. Then I say check, open bracket, then I say selling price should be greater than 0. So I'm going to just alter and I indicate this check that I'm assigning there. Okay. So these checks, like I said, are meant to help check the data before it is entered to make sure that it meets the requirements for integrity, for completeness, and also to just make sure that it is reasonable. Okay. The other constraints, we are supposed to look at. The last one is or two more. I'll have to come and look at them next time. There's foreign key and the default key. Foreign key, we have only looked at the primary side, but for us to establish a relationship, we'll need to not only define the primary key, but also define the foreign key in the other table. And that should include a reference, an indication that of the table where the primary key is to be found. Once we do that, then we have established a relationship. I showed you the graphical interface for doing that, where you go to database diagrams, new database diagram.
Yes.
Then you add the tables, then you just drag, and then you accept which one is the primary key, which one is the foreign key, and so on. But when we look at the foreign key, then we'll look at how you can use T-SQL to create relationships.
Yeah.
Unless there are any questions on what we have done so far, I will sign out. Any questions?
Sir, I've got a question.
Yes.
On the add cost constraint for the check constraint, when you execute the same order table products, what exactly did it do?
I'm trying to see who is asking the question.
Oh, it's me, Dalisa, sir.
That is so. Unfortunately, you are outside my screen.
My laptop camera is not okay.
Okay. Yes, you can ask.
Yes, I was saying the check constraint.
Yes.
What exactly, when you altered the table with that syntax, what exactly
Are
did
you
you do
able
to the table?
to refer to the row number? There are numbers.
Yes,
for the code.
number 91 and 92.
91 and 92. Okay. Yes.
Yes, when you executed that, what exactly did it do to the table? When you say check.
You are
check the
referring to this too.
Yes.
You are referring to these statements.
Yes, sir.
Oh. We did create a new table called products without the check constraint. So when in this statement from 91 to 92, modifying the table so that I add this constraint. That's why I've used the word add constraint.
Okay.
I've added a constraint to check that the selling price entered should always be greater than 0.
Oh,
Yes. Does that answer your question?
yes, sir.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, I'll stop there. Please go through those the notes as well as the book, and I'll see you on Friday.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right.
Okay.
Thank you very
Good
much,
night.
sir.
Okay.